2015. If anybody has any public comment cards, please submit them now. I am Councilmember Mike Bonin, Chair of the committee. I am joined today by my colleagues, Mr. David Rue and Ms. Nuri Martinez. Let us begin, as is custom, with the multimodal roll call. Since our last meeting, who here has commuted by bus? Mr. Lefton is raising his hand. I'm assuming he's referring to a Dash bus. By train? Cyclists? Any mopeds in the room? Skateboards? Pedestrians? All right, good mix. All right, so at this time I'm going to close the acceptance of public comment cards for the meeting. And we will let me see, I was going to refer for consent, if there's no objection from my colleagues, items 2 and 3. Items 2 and 3, we will move on consent without objection. We will begin with item number 1. And I will note at this time, while I did receive a number of cards, none of them have been filled out properly, so there will be no, they will not be accepted. So item number 1.
Item number 1 is the LADOT General Manager present a verbal report relative to the department's ongoing projects and recognition of employees for outstanding service.
Good afternoon. So today we have our normal staff recognition and then a special recognition for a couple of longtime public servants who are retiring. So first, I'm going to recognize a select group of individuals from our Transit Operation Division for implementing the real-time passenger information system on LADOT's fleet of Dash and Commuter Express buses. So please just stand when I say your name. Corrine Ralph, Head of Transit Operations. She's got 25 years of service. Brian Lee is the Supervising Transportation Planner, 13 years of service. Julie Vasquez, who is a Transportation Planning Associate with 18 years. And Michael Pasquale, the Transportation Planning Associate with 16 years of service. You guys can take a seat. The real-time information system is part of the Mayor and City Council's continuing initiative to make all of City of LA services more responsive to the needs of Angelenos. We were the very first public transit bus operator in LA County to provide real-time passenger information system on mobile devices, starting with select downtown Dash routes in 2010. The system was fully implemented in 2014, making the journeys of thousands of LADOT riders more convenient to their lifestyles. This team is proactively seeking methods to improve customer satisfaction and convenience by making use of the latest advances in information technology. So please join me in congratulating them for their outstanding performance, commitment to customer service, and going above and beyond. Now, as many of you know, we are bidding farewell to two of our executive officers, Dee Allen and Jim Lefton. Both of these individuals have had an impressive trajectory with the city and are leaving an indelible mark, and they will really be missed by their colleagues and friends. Dee had an emergency and is unable to be present, but we will be bringing forward council action to honor her service. So I'll talk a little bit about Jim. Jim, stand up. Jim has over 30 years of experience in transit, and 26 of those are working with the city to move LA forward. He started out as a Transportation Planning Associate 2 and worked his way up to Chief of Transit Services, managing a $100 million annual budget and a staff of 800 full-time employees. Under his leadership, we expanded from 100 vehicles to 350 vehicles today. Our transit fleet is 100% clean fuel. We have conducted major transit service analysis to evaluate the performance of services and expand potential Dash routes, implemented real-time bus arrival information starting in 2010, completed in 2014. One of his biggest accomplishments is his work in the Taxi Franchise Regulation Division from 1998 till 2004, overseeing the refranchising of taxi cabs. He was awarded the 2014 Sustainability All-Star Award by Green Fleet magazine and got $3 million to purchase 4 pure electric buses. Jim's successful execution and organization skills have been a huge asset. He's built a strong team that will allow us to transition, and I just personally have really enjoyed enjoyed working with Jim and admired his commitment to doing what is right and not necessarily what is expedient, and operating, I would argue, one of the most innovative transit systems in the state, if not the country. So really want to thank him for his service, and he will be sorely missed.
Hold on, I want to say a few words about Jim. I've had the pleasure of working with Jim for a while now, both as a staff member and for the past couple of years as a council member. And I actually made some notes because you hit a lot of the highlights, but there's just a few things I really want to underscore because Jim's contributions, particularly over, I think, the past 5 years, have really been pretty profound and significant, and we're really going to miss you. When you sort of took over dealing with the dash and the Prop A and all that stuff, we were going through some really tough financial times. They were really pretty painful and draconian, and you took that on when we were at one of our lowest points. And 5 years later, man, what a tremendous recovery we've had, very much in part, large part, huge part, because of your stewardship. The Dash, the City Ride, the Commuter Express services, they're all in the black, and they will be for years to come, thanks to your creative repackaging of some of our service contracts, and thanks also to some of your creative resisting of some of what the council members wanted to do with the money. Very well done. In your time, we've replaced the Commuter Express and Dash fleet with the CNG buses. Our fare structure has been simplified and rates have been reduced, which is huge. We're testing Wi-Fi on the Commuter Express buses. We have a great user interface on our Dash buses that not only has the verbal but the visual notification of the next stop location, which folks absolutely love. Paul Backstrom put this next one in. I'm not sure I should be bragging about how we've done better than Metro, but we beat Metro in bringing mobile ticketing through smartphones to the public. Again, I have mixed feelings about bragging against Metro. And we're just now about complete and installing bike racks on the fleet. So you have really done a tremendous job in making this system really something that I'm very proud of, because it really puts a premium on the passenger experience. And I'm fine bragging about this versus Metro, is Metro needs to really replicate a lot of what we've done on the Dash system. And I just want to really give you another round of applause for the work you've done. He's retiring.
He's retiring. Well, give him a few weeks of retirement and he'll look even younger. Great. Okay.
Anything else?
That concludes my report, unless there are any questions
Great.
from the
questions
committee.
for the general manager?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So that brings us to item number 5.
4 or 5?
That brings us to, let's do 5, 6, and then 4.
Okay. Item number 5 is a DOT report relative to extending the contract with Xerox State and Local Solutions Incorporated to maintain the continuity of LA Express Park project.
Good afternoon. Tough act to follow, especially after hearing about everything that Jim did. Just a terrific person, and I'm so glad that he was able to be honored here today. The reason we're here is we're requesting approval to go ahead and extend the contract with Xerox State and Local Solutions to continue to operate LA Express Park, and also continue some of the work that we've been doing with downtown LA Express Park, Westwood LA Express Park, and to also use them for the expansion of Express Park into Hollywood. We're only asking to extend the term. It's not to increase the funding limits, and all other contract provisions are to remain in place.
Okay. This is an extension, not an increase in the amount, right?
Just a time extension.
Okay. And it's a 3-year term with 2-year extensions?
Yes.
And the work you're doing in Hollywood and Westwood will take approximately 3 years to complete, right?
The Westwood, we're hoping that it's going to be completed within the next 2 months. Hollywood is going to take approximately 3 years, but with unforeseen circumstances, that's where the 1+1s come in handy.
Sort of a buffer,
Yeah.
okay. And the reason for the extension, I understand, is because Xerox developed a merged parking management platform?
Yeah,
And that's
so
proprietary?
Yeah, so the backbone of LA Express Park is what's called the Merged Parking Management System, and that is a proprietary system. Originally, we wanted to go ahead and have it where it was built for the city of LA, and we retained ownership. However, that would have costed multi-million-dollar, more than we had. And so came to the agreement that they would develop the system with understanding that they would be able to go ahead and maintain the proprietary right of the system. And so that really has become the backbone of LA Express Park, and to our knowledge, nobody else has been able to replicate the merged system at this time.
And at the end of the contract, do you anticipate we go out to bid, or are the services so specific that we do a sole source?
We have a choice for either. We're hoping that at that point there may be some other technology that's available, and the RFP will be able to go ahead and let us see if that's available. If there is nothing else that's comparable, a sole source might be recommended.
Okay. Well, I'd suggest maybe we start working on the competitive bid process just to make sure we've got our bases covered.
Absolutely.
Colleagues, any questions?
Mr. Rue? Wait, so maybe I read it wrong. So there's no cost increase at all?
No cost increase.
Oh, so you guys work with the existing budget that you have?
Yes.
The anticipated date for the Hollywood project, the HIMIS, you said 3 years?
Yeah. So what happened is that the money was originally programmed through CRA, and because there's inactivity with the CRA because of the dissolution of the agency, money was deobligated. So we've just recently got the money back from the federal government, so we're going to begin work on the design and implementation, start doing outreach. And we expect with all the different elements that we're hoping to introduce into Hollywood, it will take roughly about 3 years. And that's assuming that there's no issues, everything goes smoothly.
But you're not going to start till spring of 2016?
No, we're going to start work now on Hollywood.
Oh, because it's an old report, or, oh no, September 1st, it's, on your report it says project is scheduled to start spring 2016.
Sorry,
Yeah, that's correct. We've just gotten the authority to go ahead, and so we've actually moved that date up.
Great. So you'll start now and end in 3 years?
Right.
Great. Do you know could you provide us with the precise location for the proposed demand-based pricing for on-street metering parking? Do you have those locations?
It's actually the Hollywood area, so it's a vast area comprised of probably 500-600 different meters.
Yes.
So we have it in downtown LA, which is bounded by, it's pretty much all of downtown LA region. We're doing it in Westwood Village, and then Hollywood will be pretty much the business district of Hollywood.
You could provide us like the streets?
Yeah, absolutely. We can give you a map of exactly where the area is.
And, based on any population, traffic, parking, or congestion mitigation studies performed, can you provide us with any anticipated pricing for peak and off-peak parking hours?
Well, by ordinance, the guidance that we have is that we can go from the ordinance price, which is done by parking management zone, we can go down to 50 cents an hour or up to double the ordinance rate. And in Hollywood, it's $1 and $2, so that means it could go, under the current ordinance, could go to as high as $4.
So it could go down under 50 or high as above $2?
In other words, it can go, whatever the ordinance rate is for an area, we have authority from council to go up by as much as 100%. So if the base rate is $2, based on the demand, we can increase the price all the way to $4. Downtown, for example, the highest ordinance rate was $4, and the highest rate we've reached, which is only on 31 meters, was $6 an hour.
So up 100% or down 25%?
Or down to 50 cents.
Okay.
So the actual pricing of the meters would be done as part of the LA Express Park. So once we have the infrastructure in place, we'll be making use of the pricing engine through the merge system with Xerox, and that'll actually give us the recommendation based on demand, what the prices of the meter should be.
So will this new demand-based parking, are we expecting to increase parking revenues for those specific areas?
I can only speak for downtown, where we have the experience. In downtown, we had no revenue objectives. The revenue in the first 18 months actually went up 2.5%. But we actually were able to lower the rates, and over 3,000 of the 6,300 meters from their base of $1 down to 50 cents an hour. Most of that's in the South Park area. But basically, we're driven by the demand. And so overall rates went down, revenue went up by 2.5%. And with the other thing that's happened throughout the city is with the new technology meters, that's had a tremendous impact on revenue because the meters are up, and the fact they take credit cards has been the real driver in terms of revenue. The Express Park has not been a driver but per se in revenue, but the meter technology has been.
So do you anticipate in the other areas, besides downtown, we'll have the similar trend, lowering price and increase in revenue?
Each area, the demand pricing will be set according to the demand in the area. In Westwood, our preliminary look is that we're probably going to be raising price more than lowering price in Westwood. And that's because the demand throughout the Westwood Village is quite high. But on the other hand, downtown, we have broken our meters down. Most of the meters are broken into 3 time periods, or actually 4. During the week, they're 8 to 11, 11 to 4, and 4 to 8, and then you have the weekend rate, Saturday. And what we found is that in many of the cases, the early morning, the meter demand is low. So we've lowered the price. And I know, for example, down in I just had a woman inquiring about our pricing in I believe it was in the Flower District. Well, in the morning during the week, it's 50 cents an hour, and on Saturday, it's $4 all day. And that reflects the demand. And what we've seen downtown is that the occupancy in the low-priced areas has gone up by about 15%, and the occupancy in the very high-priced areas the paying customers have shifted, and there's fewer paying customers. And of course, the issue is that downtown, well, throughout the city, throughout the state, there's many people that don't pay, primarily because of the disabled placard policy.
And you'll get back to us once the Westwood Village one is implemented. You'll start giving us the statistics on that too, right? I'll be very interested in that. The revenues, especially if we have an increase in revenue, do you have any, are there any thoughts about having efforts to divert some of those funds, revenues, to mitigate parking congestion on side streets?
Well, we have been in discussion with council offices and even the mayor's office about making use of the revenue that comes in for multiple uses, whether it's increasing maintenance or improving infrastructure or find other kind of transportation demand management alternatives. But right now, it's only discussions. And so it's going to be something that really is going to have to be a policy from the city council to go ahead and decide what we're going to do.
To put a finer point on that, that's actually one of the discussion points coming from the Parking Reform Task Force that has been meeting, and they're scheduled to have their report and their recommendations before this committee
October 28th.
The 28th of this month? Of next month.
Yeah.
Great. Because currently, right now, all revenues goes to the general fund.
It goes to a special parking revenue fund.
Right. And but in the past, it was diverted.
Gets rated.
Yeah. Okay.
Just be honest.
Rated, yeah. That's my words, not his.
One more quick question. Has LA DOTR Parking done any community outreach in the neighborhoods lined up for these projects?
When we have the funding going forward, we do meet with the community. We discuss what kind of elements they'd like to see as part of the LA Express Park. We revisit the parking policies, and we do an extensive public outreach campaign as far as what they should expect, as far as rates, technology, convenience, and just regarding the whole demand-based pricing in general.
Okay. For the Hollywood area, my office would love to participate in that in 3 years from now.
Well, we're going to start work very soon, and we'll be reaching out to the council office to get them involved early on with the rollout and be part of that implementation strategy.
Downtown, we devoted $500,000 of the project to public outreach, and in Westwood, we've devoted $100,000 for the same purpose.
And we're going to have money diverted specifically for public outreach with Hollywood too.
Okay. Sorry, one more question, last question. Going back, for the demand based pricing, what type of demand? Is it just Well, what type of demands triggers an increase in price? Is it just if more parking meters are filled? Is that it, or is there any
No. In fact, I'd be happy to give you a paper on how we do it. Because to explain it here, and I'm a former teacher, and I can explain pretty clearly, it's going to take me about 45 minit
Oh, wow.
to go through exactly what we do. And I don't think anyone wants to be here that long, but it's not a secret. It basically, very briefly, we take the percentage of the time the spaces are occupied more than 90%. We subtract from that the percentage of the time they're occupied less than 70%. Our sweet spot is to have them occupied 70 to 90. So that if they're occupied under 90, that means there's a free space, generally a free space available on the block for availability. And if they're under 70, that means we've priced them too high and we're underutilizing the real estate. So from there, we developed an algorithm. Actually, Xerox developed the algorithm, or chose the algorithm, and we apply that then to our real-time demand, because in each of these areas with Express Park, we have sensors in the street, so we know 24/7 which spaces were paid for, which spaces were occupied. We know when they were not occupied, when they were occupied, and so that is what drives the demand-based pricing.
Well, the sensor's in the street? It's not, it's not a laser?
No, but they're working on technology where the sensors can actually be inside the parking meter himself.
Oh.
And so we're actually experimenting with that over on 2nd Street in Little Tokyo.
Oh. You know, I promise, really last question. You know when you go to the malls and they have the green light, red light?
I can see.
That's, is that sensor on the ground or is that laser?
Generally, that's laser.
That's laser.
But it can be sensor on the ground.
And they also have video detection. There's different technologies associated with that.
And that's extremely economical for a mall because it's $40,000 a space to build a space. So if you can better utilize the space through guidance, you've saved yourself.
The laser or the video camera would be cheaper than the ground sensor, right?
It wouldn't necessarily work over at the parking meter. It's more cost-effective and reliable to use an embedded sensor, or with the new technology of having that sensor inside the dome of the parking meter.
Okay, so without any objection, we will approve that item.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6.
Item number 6 is an LADOT report relative to action supporting 3 open street cyclovia events during FY 2015-16.
Good afternoon, council members. Dan Mitchell with the Department of Transportation. The report submitted here is a recommendation to extend the MOU with Ciclovia for an additional year to support 4 total open street events or Ciclovia events this fiscal year. 2 were grant funded through Metro, but 2 other cities. So the one that happened a few weeks ago in Councilmember Bonin's district was actually sponsored by the city of Culver City. And then there's another later this year in May, sponsored by the city of Huntington Park, but includes part of that route through Watts. There are 2 other events scheduled this fiscal year, one coming up in October, the heart of LA, and another in the Valley in the spring. And those would be funded through this fiscal year's budget allocations using the MOU amendment cited here. There are additional recommendations to support transferring funds into the overtime account to facilitate city staff working those events. There was a recommendation number 3 that addresses the desire for us to report back in 90 days about how open street events will be addressed in future fiscal years beyond this amendment. But we have also included as attachment C the due diligence that Ciclovia performed in doing an RFP to comply with the competitive requirements in the most recent MOU. We respectfully ask that recommendation number 4 be withdrawn at this time. We'll address that in a separate item.
Great.
And then ask that we add a recommendation that allows us to bill the two other cities and receive funds for their events during this fiscal year.
Great.
And with that, if there are any questions, I'm here to answer those.
Colleagues, any questions?
I just want to reiterate first of all, I'm very supportive that Ciclavia is finally coming to my district, but the stretch of Van Nuys Boulevard that covers my district is very unique in the sense that, first of all, we've never done this. So there needs to be adequate outreach for this very hard-to-reach neighborhoods. So you have a mixture of businesses, abandoned, apartment buildings and housing along Van Nuys Boulevard. I just want to make sure that we're partnering with the right organizations to do the adequate research, because I want to see, a nice participation on behalf of the community. And we also don't have a metro transit stop connection, so it'll be even harder to try to get people out to this neck of the woods. So I just want to make sure that we're cognizant of that.
Thank you. So I know that Ciclavia and...
Excuse me, Dan, there's a disturbance over here on the side, and if it's not stopped, I'm going to ask you both to leave. As I said at the beginning of this meeting, cards that were received that were incomplete are not going to be accepted for public comment. There were no fully complete cards that were submitted to this committee, so there will be no public comment accepted from either of you today.
Not even in general public?
There was not a complete card filled out. So I would ask you to please stop disturbing this committee. If you say one more word,
You're not at the podium. You're not a public comment speaker.
I would ask you both to leave the room.
You're interrupting this meeting at this point.
Thank you for not taking the cards anyways.
Getting back to my point, so the reason I just wanted to know from you, is there a community organization that you're partnering to do additional research,
Mr.
outreach
you're
for this
interrupting
area?
this meeting.
Yes, so partnering with Ciclavia, who has extensive experience with outreach on all communities throughout the city of Los Angeles, we will make sure and pass along those comments, as well as encourage them to reach out to your staff to get specific information so they can be as effective as possible. They're built on a solid foundation of success for outreach and engagement, and I trust that they would do the same in the Great Sixth District.
Great. Okay, without objection, then, we will approve the recommendations as modified, striking number 4 and adding the additional recommendation that Dan made about billing Culver City and Huntington Park.
Huntington Park.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to our final item, item number 4.
Item number 4 is a report from LAPD and LADOT in response to a Bond and Weezer motion relative to the enforcement of pedestrian violations. This was continued from our meeting on June 24th.
That needs to be noted for the record.
It does need to be noted for the record. It should be noted for the record that both Mr. Herman and Mr. Spindler continued to be disruptive as they were leaving and escorted out of this meeting, and I'd like the city attorney to advise me on what provisions we have to forbid someone from coming to the committee for a period of time when they continue to be disruptive.
When you have noted that the person has been disruptive and the behavior has been observed, you do have the right to have that person removed from this meeting to further prevent him from disrupting the meeting.
In council, in the past, there has been a provision where someone has been forbidden from returning for a couple weeks or something like that. Do we have that ability in committee?
That I'd have to talk.
Okay, I'd ask if you could look into it. Let me know. Thank you. We have a presentation?
Great, yes,
Great.
inaugural presentation.
Great.
I've been here a year, and I have not subjected you guys to a PowerPoint once. First
It's true, you have not.
First time. So as we're getting this loaded up, maybe if I could ask, Lori, would you mind driving the presentation from the...
Let me cue this up while you're doing that, because when this committee first heard this, neither of my current colleagues were on the committee. We heard this item in June. This was a result of a motion I did based on concern that folks were being ticketed for crossing a crosswalk at a time when they felt that it was proper to be crossing a crosswalk. In between the walk and don't walk, there is a countdown timer, and folks have been ticketed for entering the crosswalk during the countdown timer. Currently, under state law and under LAPD enforcement policies, you are subject to a violation, a fine, if you enter the crosswalk while the countdown the countdown clock is ticking. My mother, after visiting Los Angeles, was dismayed to find out she had been a criminal the entire time she was here. And we were particularly concerned that there are areas of the city where it seems like this policy has been enforced pretty aggressively. So we asked LAPD and DOT to report on this, both on what flexibility we had in terms of enforcement based on state law, also to ask DOT to report on how this policy complements or contradicts our Vision Zero policy, which we have adopted here in Los Angeles, subject of the mayor's executive order a few weeks ago. And there were a couple questions that came up in the previous committee meeting, one of which is really not a local matter. It was about how steep these fines can be. A fine for stepping into the crosswalk is like $25 from the city, but by the time the state and the county get done with it, you're talking about, $200-300 that someone's stuck with for what most of them don't think is a violation. The second, though, was what the department's enforcement policies are towards motor vehicles at the same intersections. If an intersection is hazardous, is it the pedestrian who's subject to the ticket, or is it the person who may be running a red light or turning right when they're not supposed to and stuff like that? So we began to ask the departments to look into those questions. This is a report back. I suspect we'll probably have a third one, but this is sort of the continuation of that previous discussion.
Right, thank you. So what I brought is taking a little bit of a step back, because we have had a major policy change between that meeting and this one, which is that the mayor issued Executive Directive number 10, which was about Vision Zero. And because we haven't brought to the committee an overview of what Vision Zero is and why it's important and how it relates to Los Angeles, I thought I would take a few minutes to just give an overview and kind of walk through sort of where we are and where we're headed. And Captain Fontanetta from LAPD is here with me as well. LAPD and DOT are co-chairs and co-partners on the Vision Zero effort, and so you'll see that as we walk through. As you mentioned, a couple weeks ago, the mayor issued Executive Directive number 10 to reduce traffic deaths to zero in the next 10 years. Vision Zero is something that was started in Sweden. Since then, several American cities, Chicago, New York, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, San Jose, San Diego, and now Los Angeles. We beat DC and Boston, have adopted this as well. So when we say we're part of Vision Zero, we really are saying that we're part of a national and international partnership. The fundamental tenet of Vision Zero is that no loss of life is an acceptable outcome of our transportation system. People are going to make mistakes. People are going to text while they're driving. They're going to be looking at their phones while they're walking. They're going to be distracted by children in strollers when they're trying to cross the street. But the outcome of those mistakes should not be severe disability or a fatal or death. And that really comes back to the design of the system itself. It has to do with the way we design our streets, but more than that, we're talking about culture change. We're talking about changing the way people approach the responsibility of driving something that can kill someone. Back when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, even the 90s, we didn't really wear seatbelts, and I certainly didn't ride in a child safety seat until I was 7 or 8 years old. Now, I grew up in Mississippi, so you can take your own conclusions from that. But I don't think that was that different from a lot of people who grew up in my generation. Now, those things are unthinkable. You wear a seatbelt every time you get in the car. The child goes in the child safety seat and sits in the back until they are pretty tall. And so I think that the same kind of culture change is achievable here, but that's really what we're talking about. So in Los Angeles, unfortunately, we have the dubious distinction of being at the top of the list for people who die in traffic crashes per 1,000 people compared to other large American cities. We have a responsibility to address a crisis and get off of this list entirely. The interim goals are to reduce the traffic deaths by 20% by 2017 and then get to zero by 2025. Next slide. Just to put it in context, when we start thinking about how we get there, first thing we want to know is who. Who should we be targeting? Who should we be thinking about? When you look at the crashes by mode, you see that 86% of those crashes happen when people are driving, but 44% of the deaths are people walking. So even though they're involved in a small percentage of the overall crashes, the likelihood of death is much higher for those most vulnerable populations. So if we're talking about getting those numbers down to zero, we want to attack these crashes first for the most vulnerable users, people walking and biking. And of the people walking who die in crashes, about half of them are older adults. So we're not talking about people running out in the middle of the street and disobeying the laws and the rules. We're talking about your grandmother, your grandfather, just trying to get across the street. The other thing that's important to point out is the travel mode by all trips. So the chair likes to do the mobile roll call at the beginning of every meeting. When you think about the modal split that we have in Los Angeles, about 18% of trips are made by people walking, but about 33% of people killed or severely injured are people walking. So there's a real disproportionate impact when people walking are involved in crashes. These are just some facts to keep in your back pocket. 95 crashes happen every day on our streets, and a little over 200 people die every year just trying to get around. A little under half of those are the most vulnerable people walking and biking, and 30% of all people killed or severely injured by walking or biking are children and older adults. And that's because it's just physics. They're much less likely to be able to survive a severe impact with a vehicle because they are smaller, they are frailer, they're weaker. We did a bit of analysis to find out where. So that's a little bit about who. This is about where. We looked at all of the severe and fatal crashes that are happening on the streets of Los Angeles. We have 7,500 miles of streets and alleys. About 460 miles of those represent about 65% of the severe and fatal crashes for people biking and walking. And when you look at the overlay of the lower income communities and communities where people are disproportionately impacted by obesity, asthma, negative health outcomes, there's almost total overlap. There are inequities in where people are getting killed and dying on our streets, and those inequities match up with other inequities. So sort of addressing that is a fundamental part of Vision Zero in Los Angeles. This is just a bit about vehicle speed. So, there are a lot of predictors for severe and fatal crashes. Speed is number one. So you can look at the top. This shows your cone of vision. As a driver, you're traveling faster and faster. You can literally see less and less of the roadway, and your stopping distance becomes longer and longer. So you see less. It takes you longer to react. And on top of that, it is a much lower sort of likelihood of somebody walking being able to leave that crash when it occurs at 40 miles an hour. So speed is something we think about and talk about a lot in the Vision Zero community. It's something we talk a lot about LAPD. The chair, along with Councilman Englander, put forward a couple of motions directly related to speed enforcement, and we will be bringing back some recommendations and some ideas for the council to potentially take on state legislative changes and changes here locally as well, because this is such an important piece of Vision Zero. Next. So we have to pull it all together. This is not about the council giving us oodles and oodles more money, although that would be great if you want to take that on as your budget initiative. This is about doing the jobs that we do now with better data, with more precision, and more thoughtfully. So think about how development review would look different if safety was the number one consideration and not mobility and capacity. Think about how the city would be organized. Think about how we would time signals. Think about the way that we would do all of the routine tasks that we already do as a city differently if safety was our number one goal. Next. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an example about what this might all mean. So the next sort of steps for us are to start bringing that coordination piece together and then targeting a single prioritized list of safety projects for the city. And because this is a public health crisis and a real urgent need for us to get out there immediately, we want to start with projects like this. So this is Cesar Chavez in Chicago, in Boyle Heights. Before, this is the crosswalk that was there, and after we reopened the crosswalk, we shortened the crossing distance, we increased the visibility of the crosswalk, all with paint and signal timing and bollards. So things that we had sitting in our pantry, we used to make dinner, rather than going out and having a whole new shopping trip. So the next slide just shows a little bit more detail. This is a treatment that we carried down the whole corridor. So as a driver, you start to see the street narrow, you start to see the crosswalks become highlighted, and overall we hope that we see a positive outcome. This street is within a couple blocks of 2 of the top 50 elementary schools, and so we wanted to get in immediately and just start making a difference where we knew there was a significant need. So just the last couple of slides, this is about the kind of structure of how we're going to do this. There's an executive steering committee, as I said, co-chaired by DOT and PD. And then there's a task force, which includes the Vision Zero Alliance, which is our advocacy partners, and local communities and city staff. You can go to the next slide. A lot of what's in the executive directive is report backs on everything from how we do speed surveys to how we make design decisions, and those are things that we're working on between now and Thanksgiving. So September 24th is the first task force meeting. We also have Leah Sham coming to town. She is the leader of the National Vision Zero Network, and she'll be giving a talk as well about lessons learned from Europe and other U.S. cities. But this will be the focus of our work. And in particular, I would just highlight for you October 7th is International Walk to School Day. It's a big opportunity in each of your neighborhoods, in each of your districts, to highlight Vision Zero and safety at a particular school. So that's something that we're going to be working on as well.
What date was that again?
October 7th. So this is just a little bit of contact information. We do have a Twitter account. We also have a website set up, visionzero@lacity.org, and we have a website, visionzero.lacity.org, that has all of this information, an interactive map, a detailed document on the methodology, as well as the executive directive itself. So I thought it was important to frame not just this discussion, but many that we will be having in the months to come by giving kind of a foundation on Vision Zero.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Colleagues, do either of you have any questions on Ms. Reynolds' presentation or about Vision Zero? Okay. Good. All right.
So we will be, I think that we will be back with the detailed we wanted to have the executive steering committee and the task force meet, and then have those meetings guide the report back that we do on the enforcement strategy, hoping that it will be a bit more global than just the focus on the crosswalks.
That sounds reasonable. I understand that it would be difficult for you to report on how this fits with Vision Zero, your enforcement strategy with Vision Zero, given that the details of Vision Zero have just been fleshed out about a week and a half ago. So that's cool. We'll continue this for the detailed discussion about the policy. And if the two of you can report back together for that, and just to clarify what we're looking for in the report is, one, LAPD to report with data including the number of jaywalking tickets issued in the specific locations, particularly whether certain areas of the city are targeted and whether enforcement activity is focused on areas near mass transit stops. Number of vehicles that are cited for moving violations in the crosswalks, number of vehicular pedestrian collisions and their location, attributed violation fault for each of the fatal pedestrian collision, and a determination whether the issuance of jaywalking tickets increases the safety of pedestrians. Secondly, if the LAPD and DOT can report collectively on the appropriate enforcement strategies to address the top 5 most critical threats to pedestrian safety. That really sort of fleshes out the Vision Zero stuff. And 3, for LADOT to report with recommendations for any legislative changes, education campaigns, and pedestrian signal timing that would simplify and clarify rules to crosswalk safety. I'm certainly not anticipating this to be the end-all and be-all of all pedestrian safety discussions, but use this particular motion as a springboard towards that. Also, at the next meeting on the 14th of October, when we bring this back, we're also going to be hearing a motion that Mr. Englander introduced and I seconded relative to speed enforcement on our streets. So that'll be a separate discussion we'll be having on that date. So you don't need to fold all that into this report because it'll have a separate discussion.
I have one question.
Yes, please.
If you can't answer it now, you could just provide the committee with the information, but the traffic deaths, I mean, that's a great presentation, by the way, very comprehensive. Can you possibly, or I don't even know if you have this data, but the deaths, do you have the speed of the vehicle or the speed, or the can you categorize the 33% deaths? What was the, break it down that way?
Sure. So that's the next phase of our work. So we have a consultant starting actually the same day, September 24th, to take a look at a detailed dive into the crash data that we have. Much of the crash data that we have obviously comes from LAPD, and so they have a very detailed set of information that they take at the scene of the crash, and then some of it. Sometimes we're able to glean what the speed was if the officer tagged excessive speeding, which is actually a CVC violation in the CVC violation. Other times that's more difficult to tease out just because of the way the form is written and the availability of the data right before the speed. Oftentimes, based on the severity of the crash, there can be an estimate of how fast the vehicle was traveling, but that doesn't happen uniformly. Is that about right?
That'll be a very interesting statistic to look at because the pedestrian death, I'm assuming it's a car hitting a pedestrian, right? So, and the map that you had of where the map with the red lines with the majority.
The high injury network?
Yes, the high injury network map. It'll be interesting during that data analysis with your new consultant, if you could figure out what it goes hand in hand with the traffic, with the speed of the car, but the level of congestion in that area, because obviously, was it or the time of the accident, if it was all 2 a.m., then, it will be very interesting to look at that data set.
We will. That's something I agree, something that we want to understand because we need to match, in order to come up with that one list of at least engineering improvements citywide, we need to match the cause of the crash with the most cost-effective countermeasure.
Right.
And so we need to know as much as we can about trends, right? So there's a certain randomness to traffic deaths. But when you look at a location that's had a consistent trend over time,
right,
and the same thing is happening over and over again, that's where we want to invest our resources because we think we can make a big difference with engineering. And just a final note on that, the high injury network runs across every single council district. There's no council district that doesn't have part of the high injury network in it. And as our consultant is doing the technical analysis, we will be coming around to each of the council offices to sort of share information, what we're learning, work closely with your offices, with your communities, with your stakeholders, to figure out what's going to be the most appropriate solution for the trends that we're seeing.
Do you know when that study is going to be roughly completed?
It's over the sort of most intense periods, probably over the next 6 to 9 months.
Great. All right, so we'll continue that until the 14th of October.
Thank you.
I get that date right, Paul? Okay. So that concludes this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.